Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast. My name is Isaac Kamens. This is a bi-weekly podcast where my friend Jess O'Brien and I discuss internal martial arts, Qigong, and meditation. This week we conclude our discussion on the founder of Bagua Zhang, Neijiaquan. So we look at a couple different accounts of the end of Dong's life, his death, and then we wrap our discussion up on the 36 songs and 48 methods of Bagua Zhang. And on our Patreon, we continue our discussion of the 8 bodies. We are now at the 5th body, which is the psychic body. We continue talking about the fire triagram and its relationship to Bagua Zhang mostly. So check that out. Hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support, and take care.
Welcome to the Neijiaquan podcast with Isaac and Jess.
Now we're returning to the look at the life of Neijiaquan, the master of Bagua Zhang. And I think now we've come to the end of the story where the death of Neijiaquan is on the horizon. Here's a section from Combat Techniques of Taiji, Xingyi, and Bagua by Lu Shengli, published in 2006. Dong worked for the king for more than 20 years. During that time, he did not do much teaching because he resided in the king's palace and as a result was inaccessible to ordinary students. So that's that time period where he's working for the king and the prince, maybe as a tax collector. And he teaches very few people during that time that we know of. But there's that period he's inside, we call it the inside the palace period of Neijiaquan's life. Where we've heard rumors like he taught some eunuchs. He may have taught some classes to the guards there. He may have taught a prince or two. He may have even taught some top generals when he was inside the palace.
Yeah, I mean, there's a record of a few people that he taught, but
including Yin Fu.
Right, but I think that the assumption is that either they didn't get the full thing or they got something different, right? That maybe so that the martial art that's based on 8 palm changes was mostly taught after he left, but there's no real way to verify what happened in the palace. So
right,
because those were not public record.
Right.
And
so his disciples that are listed on his tombstone are all from after he left the service of the palace.
Right.
So the book goes on. When Dong taught Bagua, he used a special method. He taught his students the Bagua idea and then taught the movements of Bagua Zhang according to each student's personality and body type. He also allowed students to change the movements as long as the changes did not violate basic Bagua principles. The great variety among the styles of Bagua practice today and the fact that these variations date from Dong's teaching lead many to believe that he and not Bi Dongxia was the founder of Bagua Zhang. So he goes on to explain there's considerable doubt that Dong even studied Bagua with Bi. Dong may have well fabricated the story out of respect for the Chinese traditional view that good things always come from a secretive source and must have a long history. So most people think that he created himself and that tale is probably not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably some inkling of some truth in there somewhere, but
sure.
Maybe the guy didn't teach him martial arts. Maybe the guy just taught him meditation, or he just taught him some Qigong. But that was the only guy he was willing to name, and that again, the thing that he came to Beijing with and ended up calling it Bagua was primarily his own creation.
Right, I think it's pretty safe to say.
Most martial arts are sort of, you get your ass kicked by someone and you ask them to teach them, ask them to teach you what they know, and that's how people learn things. And so, there's a good chance that Dong probably got his ass kicked by somebody taught him something, or he learned it as a kid. And then he learned these other things when he was, in the mountains with the Taoists. That's what became Bagua Zhang.
Right.
But again,
that's about as close as we can get. Well, here's Lu Shengli's thinking on it. He says the current most common hypothesis is that Dong learned the hard-style martial arts when he was young. Then during his travels, he had an opportunity to learn Zhuan Tian Zhuan, which is a Taoist practice method used in southern China that emphasizes circle walking practice. It is thought that Dong drew on this experience to create the Bagua training method and that he developed most of the Bagua Zhang skills during his first 10 years in Beijing. It is likely that his early disciple Yin Fu provided considerable help to Dong in this endeavor. Some believe that Dong presented only the basic idea of Bagua Zhang and that the system was actually completed in the second generation. Different masters of this generation elaborated the system and developed a variety of styles. So,
Yeah,
like that's pretty much what you were just saying. Like he gave them the seed, and then they're saying here maybe even the second generation created the palm forms themselves potentially.
I mean, everybody sort of agrees, that, as far as I know, that anything past the first 8 palm changes, and nobody can really even say what those were, came afterward.
Right.
But, that
8 palms is the main.
That what he taught was no more than 8 palms, if that.
True.
Right. I mean, and we have it from pretty good sources that he had 8 palm changes. I mean,
right.
that you can kind of.
That everyone agrees. That's the one thing everyone agrees on.
So that when you get into things like weapon sets and straight line sets and different
qigong sets, warm up sets,
that all of that
2-man sets, all
of that came from the second and third generation,
right? For sure.
Yeah,
but they do mention a lot of times when he goes to train with the 2 Taoists, they do mention the Taoists teach him weapons. They taught him sword. So weapons have been part of the art since even the very beginning,
right?
At least
but
in most
whether
of the
or not he taught that to
that's a good question. That's a good question because that curriculum's different from what Bagua Zhang became, right?
I mean, Bruce knows weapons, but he's
Yeah.
never taught them. So
Right.
It's like it was part of his training, but it wasn't
he
part
learned
of
it,
his.
but it didn't enter it into the system.
It wasn't part of what he taught. So.
Yeah. I think a lot of schools have,
and a lot of times you might like I've seen him do a couple things with staves and picked up pretty much what his ideas would be with doing shingi with a staff. And I saw one demonstration where he did Bagua sword stuff, and I could pretty much figure out what the
that's
idea.
the Fairfax demonstration,
the
notorious Fairfax
exactly.
demonstration.
And so it's like, but beyond that, it's sort of like I don't know. I mean,
it's not part of the school. I mean,
not part of the
discarded it, which is fair enough. You can't keep everything.
Well, it's also you can't. I mean, I think it's sort of.
And he said it's not worth it. Just do the other stuff.
It's also very hard to teach weapons without a large space, and a big space where people can swing swords and sticks without it being a liability is expensive in Northern California.
All right, so the rest of the story. Dong Neijiaquan died on October 25, 1882. Waking that day with a premonition that it would be his last, he called his disciples together and urged them to look after each other and to work hard so that their group would prosper and grow. He expressed the hope that the essence of Bagua Zhang would be promulgated and preserved for all time. Then, sitting in his chair with a smile on his face, he passed away. Hundreds of people mourned for him at his funeral. During a lifetime of legendary deeds and accomplishments, he made a unique contribution to Chinese martial arts. Although he never married, his family was large indeed. So then it goes on to talk about the popular styles and disciples of the style. I'd like to take a look at a piece off the Smoky Mountain Yin Style Bagua Zhang website that talks about the life of Dong Neijiaquan. So this account's a little shorter and covers a few different things. It says here, transcription of the first stele erected at Dong Neijiaquan's tomb in 1883. So this is purported to be the stone tablet from 1883 when he was buried. This is the story that's written on the tablet. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it says here, his family name was Dong. He originated from the village of in Weinan County. As a youth, he was not inclined to do farm work, but rather to the position of hero, to aid those in distress and peril to the utmost of his abilities. He was very fond of hunting and would run in the forest. Coming of age, he traveled, which brought him to visit many places around China, crossing mountains and rivers in order to expand his horizons. Later, he met a Taoist priest who taught him martial arts. Dong attained a high level of skill. Unexpectedly, in his middle years, unscrupulous people attempted to defame him. At the end of his rope, he was forced to follow the unorthodox way, to serve as a eunuch servant inside the palace. Facing injustice as his main enemy, he had no choice but to hide his skills and patriotic beliefs while serving obediently in the Prince Su palace. Reaching an advanced age and requesting further care, he decided to move into one of his disciples' house. During this time, he spent all his time teaching his large number of disciples. They ranged from influential officials, scholars, and merchants, and numbered in the thousands. Each student received personalized teachings.
Wow. Thousands, huh?
Well, that's the first time I've heard that one, actually.
I mean, it does, like that there are, whatever, 74 names on the
Sure,
list.
something like that, 72.
He only taught for 10 years. I mean, that's a lot of people to cram into a short amount of time if you're teaching them individually and not in groups.
It's true. It records the fact that he did teach one-on-one.
Yeah, well, I think most of the accounts were that he didn't teach classes.
Yeah, it seems like that was definitely a characteristic of Bagua. And it glosses over the priest part. So that's just one line. He doesn't circle the trees until they follow him or anything like that. Just like, boom. So some of them emphasize the priest side of it, the Taoism side of it. Some of them emphasize the jumping and the Qingjing abilities. This one, I don't think this one even mentions him being a waiter. That might be the first one that doesn't mention that. It says, on one occasion, he demonstrated his talents on the Great Wall while surrounded by numerous opponents, all armed with weapons and seeking to attack him from all sides. Moving rapidly like a hurricane, he intercepted them. All the spectators recognized the high level that Neijiaquan had reached in the martial arts and were awed by his excellence in bearing. I think actually we've read that one a couple times now in different translations. It might be the same story. Well, it sounds pretty similar.
There's sort of ones where he defeats people, ones where he avoids people.
The hurricane comes up when he defeats them.
Yeah.
But he can jump and hide and avoid them. It's true. He says, now to death. When he was near death from serious disease, his followers, who supported his arms and legs, said that he was built of iron. 3 days later, he died while sitting cross-legged and joined the immortals. His students from Beijing numbered more than 100 and dressed as mourners, following the funeral cortege. He was buried outside the East Meridian Gate, about 1 mile from the city. He will leave to everyone a deep sorrow. In order to commemorate him, this stele was erected to preserve his memory for the upcoming generations. February 1883.
Well, that says he has 100 students, which sounds a little more likely than 1,000.
Slightly less than thousands.
Yeah.
Now we're going to turn back to one last look at the 48 methods verses that purportedly come from Neijiaquan's teachings. Here's something from Andrea's book, Shadow on Fallen Blossoms, that shows a little bit about the name of Bagua and where it comes from. This seems the most likely to me, a style named after the trigrams, but not really of the trigrams. Similarly, there is a battle array called Bagua that sets up like the patterns on a tortoise's back, which happen to look like trigrams. The array entices the enemy into the pattern of enveloping shapes and lines, and then changes the lines to entrap, confuse, and destroy them. Bagua Zhang could well be named after the trigrams because of a general feeling. One-on-one correspondence is not required, and then the style further developed to fit that name. For instance, the use of the number 8 has been there since the beginning. As Liu Jingru pointed out, the Cheng branch has 8 great palms, the Yin branch has 8 great postures, and the Shi branch has 8 great palms. No school has 7 or 9 great palms. Clearly, the ordering by 8s comes from the very name of Bagua Zhang. Well, there you have it. We don't know where Bagua Zhang's name comes from, but as Liu Jingru said, all the schools have 8 something, so clearly that must be part of it, the pattern of the set that you do.
Yeah, well, that just goes back to that thing of whether it was because they were doing something that was Taoist and based on the I Ching, which, is based on 8s, or they were doing something that used those principles of Taoism, but, didn't have a name, so give it a name, and that Bagua was a popular name that
maybe right.
And I mean, again, it's like naming a sports team,
right?
Like you call them the Astros or you call them the Bucks, or it's like it doesn't mean anything. It's
right.
But if you happen to be from Texas and you call your team the Longhorns, people are like, yeah, we're and then
it's a good fit, right?
And then everyone's wearing fake horns on their head, and it's like, so it's I think
good mark.
But I mean, personally, I actually think that it is based on Taoist principles.
Sure.
And it did come from things that were using the 8 trigrams, and that's why he called it that. But again, I don't think that use of the 8 trigrams is the same thing as teaching Taoist principles.
Right.
I mean, it's like you can learn a lot about Taoism, a lot about Bagua, a lot about internal martial arts, and never, ever, ever pick up the I Ching and read it. Right? I mean, like reading it and understanding the I Ching is like just another level of it that you could go to, but it's not required. I mean, that happens to be, it's sort of like, the thing that it was originally based on, right? For example, Buddhism, right? It was originally a sect of Hinduism, and it became its own religion, right? It's like, because you start out with one thing doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be where you end up, but you might keep some of those ideas and some of those names to
the language that goes around it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, probably what happened was, that lots of things went into it. He definitely put it into a certain type of package that had something to do with 8.
Right.
And then subsequently people kept that, that motif of 8, and it developed into 64s and, things like that. But again, it's just a memorization tool mostly, I think, because when you're actually learning martial arts, you learn it much more sort of organically than that. I guess you could learn it by, memorizing series of things, but, usually it's like you learn a thing, you work on that thing for a long time. So you learn a basic principle and you work on that basic principle for a long time, and you learn a few forms, but essentially until you get past that basic principle, you're not going to get any better at the forms, right?
Right.
So if you have, if you can't squat, or you can't turn your hips, or you can't open and close your joints, you're going to have a really hard time doing a lot of this stuff, regardless of what you call it. And so learning how to do those things kind of, is the main thing. But you might remember what to do better if you give it a name.
Right.
And that's the same thing as, naming scales in music, or, I played
patterns. Create a pattern with a name, and then you can memorize it easier.
Very few people, when they're playing music, say, okay, I really dug that Mixolydian tune you did, right? You don't reflect on it by, the notes. You say, damn, that song had a great groove. There's a feeling to the song that's what you remember. That's the impression you get. And if you're a musician, that's hopefully what you pass on when you play, right? So it's the same thing here. There might be a whole bunch of memorization tools, a whole bunch of forms that you got to remember, but the essence of the thing is usually in those first few techniques. That's just kind of how most of these things work. So you spend, an hour learning the first move, a lifetime understanding how to do it, right? It's like, it doesn't just end when you can do the form. That's kind of what makes them fun.
Right. You can get more out of it by putting more into it, and that's one of the great things about it. I have to agree. So let's take another look at these Bagua Zhang classics that might inform our practice. So this one's called the Heart and Eyes Method. The mind is the general and the eyes are the weapons. It's possible to conquer him with awareness. If mind and eyes do not perform at their best, this leads to the confusion of all movements.
I think that just has to do with reacting to what you actually see, as opposed to what you think might be happening or might be about to happen.
It says it's possible to conquer him with awareness. So your awareness of what they're about to do could put you in a better position.
Yeah, well, if you're really aware of it, you avoid the situation entirely, right?
Next one, glaring method. Attacks come from all directions, as well as in the dark, without moonlight. Lower the center of gravity and observe carefully. Use curled steps to achieve victory. So once again, you're using steps to do everything rather than hand movements.
Right, that sounds like that's just advice for fighting in the dark.
Sounds like it, yeah. So attacks come from all directions, so you use curled steps and hooking type of steps. And lowering yourself. Again,
it's just if, a bunch of people are attacking you, don't stay in one place. Don't stay at one height. Keep moving. Keep going up and down, The more you move and the less you stay in a predictable pattern, the harder you are to get a hold of. And so I think that's, like that butterfly idea.
Right. Well, here, using the curled steps, that reminds me of one time when, I don't know if I should admit this, but did the thing where I had 8 people put on a boxing glove and try to punch the person in the middle all at once. And we were testing a theory. Can Bagua work against 8 people? So 8 people get 1 punch each, and they're all supposed to just lunge in at you. So we tried it a number of times. And I have to admit, using the curled steps, like it says here, if you start turning real quick right as they all come in at once, you can kind of get a whirlwind effect and block a bunch of them at once, especially if they're inexperienced. You can kind of just sweep a bunch of their arms aside.
Yeah,
And
it's the spinning top.
Yeah,
effect,
exactly.
right?
So that I related to this curled step thing. It's an interesting exercise, but I wouldn't say it proves anything about multiple combat.
Well, I mean, I think,
It's
fighting 8 people or multiple people is a whole skill set unto itself. But one of the basic ideas is that, there's only so many angles that somebody can come at you from if you're moving, right? If you're standing still, they can come at you from a lot more angles because you're not moving,
Sitting
right?
down, yeah.
So that's why, I mean, a lot of times, people don't stand still when they fight. They kind of walk in a circle because you're trying to get instinctively people know that, trying to get an angle, trying to get to flank somebody is just a good idea rather than coming in straight. So, it's just something animals do it. It's like, it's just
pretty instinctive.
That's super instinctual kind of behavior when you feel threatened.
All right, well, this one is pushing the limits, though. It says protect the body method. No surprise that the strong beats the weak, but it's a real skill if the weak can defeat the strong. No matter how powerful and fast the opponent is, turning and rubbing the body to left and go around to the right. I mean, so he's claiming that the weak can beat the strong with this footwork of taking that oblique angle, just like you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, basically, again, just don't let the person get their hand on you and they can't hurt you, right? If they can't apply any pressure to you, it doesn't matter how strong they are.
So you've got to quickly turn as think they're getting you, and you're turning to sort of deflect them.
Yeah, well, there's a
right.
moment when somebody thinks they're going to hit or grab something, they commit to it, right? They fully, go for it. And that's the moment where you have to move, because when they go for it, if you don't move, they're going to get you.
Right.
But if you move, they're probably going to fall down or lose their balance because they've overcommitted to doing one action rather than having a balanced movement.
So that's real skill if the weak can defeat the strong, saying it's not common for weak to beat the strong. So that actually, it's recognizing that that's not easy to do, but that turning is the way. Seems like if you don't get away from that blow, then that's pretty much it.
Bagua is definitely a good martial art for smaller people, smaller framed people who are going to be fighting bigger people, because it doesn't directly take that forward action. It always is evading things and moving on angles and
Take
stuff.
advantage of that quicker footwork of a smaller person.
That's just sort of just the way Shingy would kind of lend itself to heavier, bigger people, because it's.
All right, so here's confusing the opponent method. To be able to confuse his mind, first confuse his vision. Thousands of techniques are no better than one thrusting palm. Palm thrust to the nose continuously. Alternate the steps around both sides. Pretty practical advice.
Yeah, I mean, that's just
Punch him in the face continuously.
Well, and get them to fear you. Right? I mean, because
it's kind of a great idea.
If it's not even fear, it's confusion, right? That if you can get them confused, they start to question what they're doing and then what they're or what you're doing, and then they start to be unsure of themselves, and that leads to being scared, and then being scared leads to not being able to react very well. So if you can get someone to start feeling, it's why people do funny movements when they do weird hand movements and things
Feints
like that.
And stuff,
it's because it gets the other person to feel unsure of what's about to happen, right? That,
It confuse the mind.
and one of the things you learn in internal martial arts is you just don't react to things that aren't going to actually do anything to you. So, if the person's swinging their hands around, but they're 2.5 feet away from you, you don't need to really be that worried about it.
Right.
But when they get close to you, you punch them in the face. You knock out their 2 front teeth. You don't wait for them to do something.
Right.
If they're 2 feet away and they're throwing punches and they get 1 feet away, don't wait for them to throw the punch.
Right.
Just hit them.
Right.
And that's kind of that forward thing of keeps.
A lot of the advice is that as they get that close is when you change your angle and attack right at that moment. But you gotta be there on time. They also get bowled over.
Yeah, you want them as close as possible before you hit them.
But yeah, the punching them in the face is a pretty nice solution to the problem of someone charging at you. It's very practical. All right, here we go. One last one. Opening and closing method. It is common to open before closing. It is important to see the opening and prevent the closing. A comeback will be staged after a failed attack. Understand pointing to the east and then striking to the west. That's a little more mysterious, but I think you open and close, you prevent the other person from opening and close, and then beware of the retaliation from a failed attack.
Yeah, and just not being that last piece about going east and feigning west or whatever. That's the idea of you can be walking in one direction and hitting in the other, right? You can hit them as you walk away from them, kind of, right? That you're just moving all the time. So, sometimes you're going to be going towards them and hitting them, but sometimes you might be, turning around. That's like the double palm change thing. You're doing a piercing palm as you're turning away from them, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the comeback that they mentioned after a failed attack, that reminds me of how in Bagua, like, if you deflect their attack, now it's your turn for the comeback to come. So give them more of what they're trying to do, then you're in position to stage an attack. It's the evasiveness of Bagua, I think. It's just, that keeps coming up again and again. Don't confront force with force, use the proper angles, use twisting, use turning, use the body, use the feet, all that stuff that we've been talking about for an entire season.
Yeah, I probably could have done this in a lot fewer than 46. Let me tell you, you probably have 10 of them.
48.
Name all of the techniques. It's just saying the same.
Right. Well, there's other shorter lists that I think maybe distilled from this type of stuff.
But a lot of these things are just sort of saying the same principles using different examples or different body parts or different, kind of situations, right?
Right.
What do you do if you're surrounded? What do you do if you're in the dark? What if you do if the guy's fatter than you? What do you do if the guy's taller than you, right? It's just like, kind of, which are the kinds of things that, students will ask their teacher all the time, what do I do if if I can't do, and most of the time the answer is you lose. Right. But, every so often you figure out a way of overcoming something that you don't understand. But, it's like, if the most common question I remember people asking it, and people ask me it all the time, well, how do you beat somebody who's, bigger and stronger and faster than you? You don't. You lose. That's just how that.
Right.
If they're bigger, stronger, and more skilled than you, you're fucked.
Right. That's 3 out of 3.
You run. But if they're just bigger than you and you're more skilled and faster, then you might have a chance.
Right.
But it's like,
you got to even those odds a little.
Yeah, but it's like there is that situation where it doesn't matter how much you practice, the person's just going to flatten you.
Right.
And it's like that's one of the more important lessons to learn, I think, as a martial artist is there are people out there in the world who have never trained martial arts in their entire life who could take any punch you've got, pick you up, throw you on the ground, and stomp on you, and there ain't a damn thing you could do about it because they weigh 400 pounds and they lift rocks all day long. It's just, that's like a reality. And that's when, something like Bagua works really well because you know what you can do with someone like that is you can get the fuck out of there. And if you got fast footwork, when they come at you, you can
That's your best chance, pretty much.
Your one little Kobu Bagua and get the fuck out of the way, and there's your door, and bye bye. It's like, don't stand around thinking that you're gonna take on someone who's 10 times bigger than you just because you've trained a little bit. It's like,
I mean, you can hear the teacher's advice in this stuff, whether it was Neijiaquan or not. It sounds like a somewhat, jaded sort of. He's heard it all before, so he's got these lines he uses. He's just like, move your feet before you move your hips, or whatever it is. He's always got slogans to kind of like answer all the students' questions.
Well, it's addressing the sort of common mistakes that people make with Bagua, right? I mean, the biggest single mistake people do with Bagua is they don't move their feet, and they just do something with their hand. And over and over and over, what does he say?
He says that a million times.
The movements the hand movements are coordinated with the foot movement.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Bruce's line is a kick is a step is a kick, right? That every time you move your foot, it's gonna step, but it could also kick. And then the sort of pairing to that is that you kick them with your hand. That you can step, and that kick, quote unquote, is actually your hand hitting them in the face, but the power from it is coming from your foot.
Right. And he emphasized again and again in these classics how that's at the heart of it. So it's been interesting. We've looked at a bunch of different books over the year, and like, you can just see these themes running through it, and there's a lot of them. I feel like we've only kind of scratched the surface, but you can already see how these common ideas are blending in the worlds of internal martial arts and come down to us today, and it's fun to practice and dig deeper into it.
Hey folks, Isaac here. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the Chuan series. You can hear the first 5 parts of it on the feed. Again, check out the Instagram and the Facebook for images to go along with the episodes. We also have a YouTube page if you'd rather listen to this on YouTube. All right, take care of yourself, and thanks for listening.